So why did you start this organization? Why did you focus on financial education as a way to support long-term economic development in North Korea?
Yeah. So when I was a student at Penn in 2007, I had the opportunity to go to China in one of the summers to do research and intern in China. And for me, it was really exciting because I had some time during my internship. So I went to North Korea actually just as a tourist. And for me, what was really interesting there was that, going in, I was familiar with the usual stereotypes of North Korea as a communist economy. But what really surprised me was that I met university students who were very interested in business and economics. They wanted to get access to books on the topics. They wanted to find ways to learn about it. And in general, they're just very curious in hearing about it, especially from someone who was studying business in a university setting. So when I left there, it left a very deep impression on me because there just wasn't a lot of people in this field doing something in this area. And that's kind of how my interest in this area began. And so kind of after that, I worked with a few friends, spent 1.5 years trying to find a way to go back into North Korea to set up these programs that we're doing in North Korea. And so what we do now is we do workshops for younger, high potential adults in the areas of business, economics, and law.
Okay. So can you give us a snapshot of economic development today in North Korea? What does it look like?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the young people, they're very interested in trying new things. They want to set up their own business. They want to implement a lot of the things that they learn and hear from the rest of the world, or things they read in textbooks. So that's kind of the stage they're in. And the problem though is that it's still a very restrictive economy and society. So a lot of the things that they want to try to do, they don't really have the space to go out and implement it. So we have a lot of discussions with younger people who are trying to implement some of these ideas even within their own setting. But down the road, we can see a lot of them moving out to set up their own business and try to drive some of this change outside of the existing organizations.
Okay, so tell us about the workshops.
Yeah.
How do they take shape?
So the workshops, normally what we do is we first go in there and we talk to the various institutions to try to understand kind of what they want to learn about. And it's a very interesting process because when you talk to these people, they have very limited access to information and they're trying very hard to understand the world around them. So we had conversations, say, with a banker in North Korea, and she would tell us like, I've read this term in the Financial Times, and I don't know what's it about, but it sounds very interesting, and I've seen it come up quite a few times in the paper. And some of these terms are like private equity, exchange-traded funds, topics that are relevant in the rest of the world, and kind of people are very interested in it. But then in North Korea's setting, it's just like we tell them these are not things you could implement in the next 20, 30 years, and they'll be very disappointed. But it's very interesting to see them being very curious about the process. So we normally would talk to them about these different topics, get a sense for what they're interested in and what they can realistically try to change in the next 3 to 5 years. And then we would say, this is a topic we want to work on. And then we would bring in a team of workshop leaders who are volunteers from the business or policy sectors. And then they would kind of do small group workshops to discuss some of these topics and try to get them to think about how they could potentially implement some of this knowledge within the environment.
So how strong is business education in North Korea currently?
Yeah. So the issue there is that they don't have access to most of the modern knowledge that's been created in the business area. So we have looked at some of the universities and what kind of books they have in the libraries. And we see financial textbooks from the 70s published in the Soviet Union, which kind of makes me a bit dubious about the extent to which they capture the current field of knowledge in some of these areas. And a lot of them, one thing really interesting is that they are very conscious of the fact that the world sees them as being very isolated. So when we do a workshop, they tend to try to throw up big words that they might have read somewhere or heard about it from someone in the topic. And very often they don't actually understand the concept behind it. So we had some of them raise like corporate social responsibility in a topic that had nothing to do with it, but then they were trying very hard to show that, I've read a little bit, I've learned a little bit of what's happening outside, and I'm kind of in tune with the theories that I invoke. But very often you realize that there's a weak conceptual understanding of some of the things they raise.
Mm-hmm. So have you actually seen results from the education that you've given to them? I mean, are they going out there and starting interesting business careers and really putting some of what they've learned into practice?
Yeah, I think in terms of studying businesses, it's still a very early stage. But in terms of some of the training we've done on the investment laws in North Korea, we have seen some results from that. Like last year, we did a few programs where we were very much focused on this area of how do you change a law so that investors feel safer in putting their money in the country. And earlier this year in January, they updated some of those laws. So we have seen some changes come out of the programs. Some of the programs we are looking at much longer term change because again, we are very much focused on young adults in the 20 to 40 age range. And there will be at least a 10, 15-year period before they are able to have a much more senior say in terms of how decisions are being made. So that's kind of the horizon we have in terms of where we expect to see most of the impact.
So how are you following their progress?
Yeah, so we try our best to keep in touch. Obviously, it's North Korea, and the way it works there is that each organization have one email, so you can't really email each individual on a private basis. But then we would go in there and sometimes we'll meet people that we have done training with before, or we'll talk to people who know them, and we try to follow what their progress is and try to keep in touch with them in those ways. Or sometimes when they come out of the country for a project, they'll reach out to us and just email us and let us know how things are happening with them. And it's kind of, I guess, it's very hard to conceive, like, in this day and age where you could just email a friend, find them on Facebook, call them, that, there's still so much logistical challenges just to hear from people that you've worked with in training programs.
Have you seen social media having an impact at all in the economy?
So the thing about North Korea is that they don't have free access to the internet. So there's a local intranet in North Korea where North Koreans can get access to it. It's limited in terms of the materials they have from outside of the country. So in that sense, we have not seen social media in the way, like in terms of Twitter, Facebook, having much of impact in North Korea. But they are starting to reintroduce mobile phones in the country, and it's becoming very popular among a good proportion of the population who can afford it. And I think people are starting to more actively communicate with each other, and I think that's a very interesting development in the country. Yeah, we have met North Koreans overseas who use Skype to communicate with each other, and we find that pretty interesting too.
So as you build out your organization, say in the next 5 years, what do you see as your main goals? And what do you see as your biggest challenges as well?
Yeah, I think for us, we are very happy targeting younger adults. As you mentioned, in 20 to 40 years old, high potential, very curious, very intellectually motivated. It's because this is a group of people who, they see a very interesting ideas, they're very excited by it, they want to test and try it out. And we're kind of looking for that kind of people to involve in our programs. So we probably want to expand the number of people we involve from that age group. And also we want to kind of, get them to think about the next step. So it's not just learning about business or finance or economic policy, but also saying like, now that I've learned this, how can I actually go out and set up something and implement some of these ideas that I've learned? And we may actually try to support them maybe by setting up a business incubator, which is kind of the concept behind it is that people are interested, but then they don't always know how to go out and set up a business, raise capital, how to set up proper accounting system. And so we would probably come in and support them in terms of helping them realize their dream by providing them with this kind of resources and some of the funding to get them to create those businesses.
Is there any incubator infrastructure existing now?
Yeah. So I think this is kind of the exciting part of our work and also the most challenging part. I think currently, it's a very alien concept to them. For most of them, when you talk about like business, the idea is that, here's a bunch of sea urchins. Why don't you change it for tires? And that's their concept of business. So the concept of a business incubator is even harder for them to grasp because they've never seen it before and they need to find permission to get it done within the system. So we have started introducing the concept to them to get them to feel a little bit more comfortable with it. But I think it's something that we have to work towards, and I guessing in 2 to 3 years' time, we may actually be able to get it set it up in terms of how we envision it to function.
So are the young people you speak with and who are involved in your seminars, are they very entrepreneurial?
Yeah.
Have you found that they really want to start their own businesses? And if so, in what areas does it seem that they're interested in doing that?
Yeah, I think for most of them, there is a lot of excitement really just because they read a lot of these things, and they've been to, some of them who have the opportunity to go to other countries. They've kind of seen things that they never experienced in North Korea. And so, for example, they will visit like a supermarket in China, or visit a fast food chain in China. And for them, they're like, wow, this is a very interesting concept. It has the kind of connotations of modernity. So they look at a fast food restaurant and see it's not just convenience and cheap food, but it's fast, it's clean, it's modern. And so they're thinking like, wow, this is something very new to me. And a lot of them want to bring those concepts back because it's just for them something that's very innovative and exciting. So there is a lot of the interest. There's so much curiosity just because they read so much about all these things. They've seen a little bit of it in the short time that they spent overseas. But they haven't had the chance to actually go out and try to get it set up in a space where none of this really exists. So I think there's a lot of excitement among that group of people.
And excitement for their futures. It sounds like you're hearing that from them, that they have a lot of hope.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of challenges too. And I think it's always going to be there's going to be some opening up process where they have more leeway to do things. And then sometimes it's going to be a bit more strict and restrictive. So it's, I think for them, especially when you're between 20 and 30, I think there's definitely always a lot of excitement. And I think, maybe when we see them getting to 30 to 40 years old, people tend to be a bit more rational and kind of a bit more, want a more stable path in life.
You mentioned visiting China, and China actually has great influence on the North Korean economy, correct? By way of investing. And I'm wondering, does that also have an impact on the financial and business education? Yeah,
I think China is interesting to them because, China used to be a communist country. The economy used to be state-owned, and there's a process of privatization. There's a process of introducing elements of a market economy. There's still a lot of state-run aspects to China today, but then through that process, they have introduced a lot of the concepts that never really existed in China before that. Like just think about the banking industry. In the past, if the bank had money, they would just give it out to institutions that had assets or which the government thought was critical to the national economy. But today, basically when they assess whether this company should be receiving the loan, they think about, can they repay it back? How much should we be charging them based on what we think is the risk of them not paying us back? And then those are just radically different concepts. And for the North Koreans who go out to China, they can see that, at some point 20 years ago, we were at the same point in terms of how our economy is structured. But now look at where China is, look at kind of how living standards have changed there, look at all these interesting things that they're doing there. And I think that definitely has a huge impact for the North Koreans who had the opportunity to visit China.
So what insights have you gained about business education for young people in North Korea that you feel can be applied to youth around the globe?
Yeah.
Some of the lessons that you've seen or insights that you've gained that you feel are applicable globally?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think the 20 to 30 age range, not just in North Korea but anywhere else, is kind of the period where people are very driven by new ideas. They're very excited. They're willing to go out and try something very different. And I feel, that is the best age group to encourage them to go out and push for new ideas, to get new ideas off the ground, versus waiting for someone down the road where they are more concerned with building a family. They need to have a pool of savings to ensure that they have, them and the family have a certain standard of living. I think really the age group to focus on is that 20 to 30 age range where, people have some education and they're very excited about doing something different, and they're just at a stage in life where they are able to afford those risks.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.